something to just consider. We can't be in fight or flight and rest and digest at the same time. So at a cellular level, our cells cannot be in a thriving state and surviving state at the same time.
Today, we'll explore a hidden powerhouse of wellness that's been right under our noses, or should I say, running through our entire bodies. Imagine feeling constantly on edge, battling unexpected pain, struggling with sleep, and wondering why traditional approaches just aren't cutting it. What if the root of these issues isn't where you've been looking, but in a complex network that controls everything in your body? We'll be diving into the mysterious world of the nervous system with an expert who's helped thousands break free from chronic stress and pain cycles. Dr. Helen Porat isn't just another physical therapist. She's a former competitive gymnast turned doctor who's cracked the code on how our bodies truly heal. We'll uncover the hidden ways your nervous system impacts your health, explore groundbreaking techniques for regulation, and provide you with practical, actionable strategies that you can implement immediately. So whether you're dealing with chronic stress, unexplained pain, or simply just want to optimize your body's performance, this episode is your roadmap to understanding and healing your nervous system. Hey, good morning, Dr. Porat. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to talk about all of this.
Yeah, and I think like myself, many listeners, may not be familiar with exactly what the nervous system does, how it relates to stress and anxiety. And you probably answered this a million times, but do you mind breaking it down in like the simplest terms for the audience?
Yeah, I actually really appreciate this question because as my algorithm shows me everything nervous system on my page, I can only imagine like how overwhelming it can be. I'm a physical therapist. I've been working with chronic pain, all different types of ailments for over a decade now. And so I find that even when it comes to nerves, like muscles, you can feel, you can contract, you can kind of have this like experience, but nerves just kind of seem like this. We know we have them, but what are they? And then we start talking about the nervous system. What nervous system are we talking about? So let me just break it down to you the same way that I would break it down to like my 9-year-old daughter. When we talk about the nervous system, most people are talking about the autonomic nervous system. So this is something that's happening automatically. It's supposed to be happening automatically without our knowledge. So it's in charge of our breathing, right? Like that would be very inefficient if we had to think about every single time we took a breath. So all of our primal functions, heart rate, tummy, digestion. So we're talking about the autonomic nervous system, which we're going to talk about the two different nervous systems that it houses. Our sympathetic nervous system, so most people know this as our stress center, and our parasympathetic nervous system. Most people could understand this as like that rest and digest, right? So we have the big umbrella of the ANS, the autonomic nervous system, and these two branches. Now, when you hear about nervous system, most people are talking about this kind of unruly, untamed, sympathetic stress response. And that is a normal response. It's actually something that you want to happen. So, the way that I would describe it again to anybody, or you might have learned this in school, is like you see a bear. What are you going to do? That's fight or flight, right? Fight, flight, freeze. In Southern California, we're not running away from bears, but we are dealing with like traffic or stopping from collision. So let's go back to that because that's probably a little bit more tangible. You're going to slam on your brakes. Your eyes are going to get more acute. Your heart rate is probably going to go through the roof. Your muscles are going to tense up, right? Ready to fight, ready to take action, and hopefully avoid a collision. So that's a really important response and not one that we want to completely get rid of. But what happens after that is important. So after we have this event, sympathetic spike response, we're supposed to afterwards kind of go down on that stress response and have a rebound in our parasympathetic response. And so we're supposed to kind of digest, dissolve, our muscles relax, we can go back to normal digestion, our heart rate kind of goes back to resting state, and then we have this blissful parasympathetic rebound that just brings us back to rest and digest, and we can forget about that almost 405 freeway incident. What's happening to most people is that we aren't getting that parasympathetic rebound. And so when you hear about the nervous system, most people are talking about just this kind of chronic low-level state of sympathetic dominance.
Okay, yeah, that breaks it down a lot better for me because I think depending on what field you go into, you may not ever think about it again other than when you kind of like pop through an article on a magazine or something like that. Thank you for that breakdown. But how about when we take it more into like gut health, heart health. I feel like the nervous system maybe flies under the radar in that area. Why is that so crucial for our overall wellness?
Yeah. So now kind of understanding what roles the autonomic nervous system is supposed to have in our body, that's talking about a regulated, healthy system. And again, I mean, if you're now early 2025, most people have a new norm called chronic stress. And so instead of having this big event of, you know, avoiding a survival mechanism, we have this low level stress, which in return, if we think about what normal is, normal would be normal digestion, normal heart rate, right? There's a change in acidity levels in your stomach when you are in a stress response. And so when we talk about gut health, or people are like, well, my tummy, I'm bloated, or I have IBS, or I have anxiety, or, maybe I have to go on an elimination diet because I think that I'm just not responding to foods the right way. Then they start doing like really strict regimens and trying to problem solve. That's where we really have to get to that underlying idea and just asking ourselves and becoming more knowledgeable about the nervous system and saying, are we ever accessing rest and digest, or have we just been used to living right in this now chronic stress situation? And if we are in a chronic stress situation, then we know that your stomach has a change in acidity levels. We know that your gut mobility is going to be affected by that. And it also means that you're just not going to be absorbing nutrients. So this is where it's just like tears at me, because you're doing the best. You're getting like high quality supplements. You're doing all of the right nutrient dense foods, but like you literally can't absorb nutrients because your body just isn't accessing rest and digest branch, that rebound that we talked about.
And on the cardio side, is that more of like when you said you're in the traffic and you sort of your body reacts? Is that sort of where it affects the cardio side of the nervous system?
I can tell you a little bit about like some of my patients who have had like an acute stress response. They feel like they're fine, but then they continue to have this like racing heart before they go to bed at night, like that sort of thing. And
Yes.
that's just an output of an autonomic nervous system that, is just kind of confused and stuck in that chronic stress state.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and
Yeah.
another term that I always come across the vagus nerve,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And somehow affects our stress levels. But to me, and I'm sure many listening, it's a bit of a mystery. I was wondering, like, could you sort of maybe demystify that and explain why it might be? I've seen the super highway of our well-being. Is that accurate?
It's very accurate. So my job with my clients is having them understand just really mechanically what it is that our nervous system is. Because again, it's like you can't really see it. You start to wonder like, oh, my heart, my gut issues. So we have to understand the nervous system language. Okay. So let's talk about why the vagus nerve would even be important in this situation. We're going to just assume that the premise is that we are never reaching parasympathetic rebound. And so something to just consider, we can't be in fight or flight and rest and digest at the same time. So at a cellular level, our cells cannot be in a thriving state and surviving state at the same time. So understanding that, we have, first of all, a chemical problem where we're just not accessing thrive state because we can't get rid of surviving state. Now, chemically, right? And no one needs to like go to school for this. No one needs to remember even what vagus nerve, the name means. We just have to understand that if we have that inundation, it's like, just imagine this like open sink, like a water faucet, because when we are in that fight or flight, it's just basically like our brain is communicating to our bodies and just opening up a faucet of stress hormones, right? Initially important, now inappropriate. And that's what we're inundated with. And so that's where we just feel kind of crummy, that like wired but tired, brain fog, fatigue, irregular heart rates. Like we're tired, but we wake up at 3 a.m. We're doing the good diets, but our tummy still hurts and our muscles are tight. And so we need to first close that faucet down, right? So we need to close the sympathetic faucet because it just becomes more and more inappropriate and like not as discerning to an actual threat. So now we're opening up an email, we're opening up a text message, and we get this like open faucet as if we're avoiding a collision, right? So we have to change the appropriateness first on that sympathetic response. Concurrently, we have this parasympathetic nervous system that we have to learn how to access rest. So I promise I'm going to answer your question about the vagus nerve, but I think just understanding that kind of like body math, I like to just call it body math, right? Like if we have too much of one thing and not enough of something else, Well, that vagus nerve is going to come in and kind of tie that, like you said, a fast track, a toll road, that parasympathetic highway of bliss. And the reason why is because if you can get more blood flow through your vagus nerve and activate it, it activates that parasympathetic branch of the nervous system. Again, no one needs to understand these words, just understand that it's making your body math better. Our body math is probably bad, and it's just going to make it better. So any questions on that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, what are some tips to sort of like regulate that? Because I think some people maybe not realize they're in this fight or flight mode.
Yeah, so the first thing that we have to have is awareness. So if you have no idea what your nervous system is doing, or you're not really understanding the language of the nervous system, then you're going to be really caught off guard and surprised when you start to have these. So usually they come in whispers or like small symptoms. And then there's usually predictable outcomes that we'll do when we are in a stress state. So number one is awareness of the state of our nervous system, or you can say awareness of like maybe what level of stress you're at. And I actually teach my clients what's called neural awareness, which is just being able to objectively assess, I use this green, yellow, red light method. Am I in green? Am I like bliss, creative, flowing? Like I'm just, have all of these great ideas and I'm feeling good. I'm feeling really like loving and harmonious. My children are angels and just everything is going right. Or am I in yellow, which I'm assuming most people are, that kind of like that micro stressed, micro rushed, just that low dosage of chronic stress. And then red is more that fight or flight. You're feeling argumentative, reactive, or oppositely, another sign of this is actually withdrawn. So it's not very loud. It's more just like that. I just don't care about anything, right? And that's actually a red zone. So the first thing is awareness, being able to assess and start to understand the language of your nervous system. Typically in a social setting, we can, if you have no idea, you're like, I don't know what my nervous system is doing, right? I guess I'm always kind of micro rushed. So you just start to tune in and you just kind of have it be a practice. Like, how am I feeling when I'm getting out the door in the morning? Am I in the yellow zone? And again, another thing is just practicing like not really having judgment. Like the more objective you can be, the better it is for your nervous system and the faster you're going to be able to make changes. So that is one way that we can start to understand the language of the nervous system, is building neural awareness. And then once you have that, you can now start to understand your goal in just wanting to shift appropriately, right? So we're not going to be like chasing the green zone, but we can be like, okay, like I'm definitely aware about how this is affecting me during the day. And the fastest way, my approach is by building this awareness, I alleviate kind of from a bottom up. So getting it out of your body and making your brain feel better. And then kind of the top down, having this like understanding of the nervous system language and being able to be a better driver of your nervous system because of that. And so the fastest way that you can access vagus nerve, the fastest way that you can access a shift in the state of your nervous system is by accessing your deep diaphragmatic breathing. Your diaphragm is your primary breathing muscle, and that has a lot of blood flow, a lot of currency for your body math when we're able to breathe properly. And so it's quite amazing because there's people that have felt this way forever, that again have tried the best diets, that, have done all of these really mindful interventions, and then you just get them to start breathing better. And this is the cool thing, just how our brain communicates with our body. All of a sudden, our body starts alleviating the messages to our brain and we start closing that sympathetic faucet. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
I also wanted to ask you though, so someone might be in tune. I have that self-awareness of where I'm at, maybe, red, yellow, green kind of feeling. But what if they feel like, okay, it's a yellow, it's, I'm touching green sometimes, but I'm not sure if it's your website I read it on, but the nervous system might be masquerading like other health problems. So how can someone sort of determine, or maybe what's some symptoms that they might not be paying attention to, that maybe like a dysregulated nervous system could show up in our lives to be hiding something else more serious?
So like anything else, it just comes down to your body doing too much work, because we're not meant to be in that survival state for prolonged periods of time. And so ultimately, it's going to wreak havoc on any system, right? Because it's in charge of your heart, it's in charge of your gut, it's in charge of brain function. The biggest symptoms that I've been seeing, fortunately, there are some people that are so excited about just like biohacking and like improving their health, but more times than not, it's because they're at the end of the road. They've gone to their doctors. They understand that they don't feel right. And yet their labs are coming back normal. And so they end up kind of chasing these diagnoses. Like, I know there's something not right with me, and get a diagnosis like IBS, like anxiety, long haul COVID, mast cell activation syndrome, which that's for another day. That's for another hour, and so we'll start seeing some of these like chronic illness types of diagnosis. If they're lucky, they might even get a practitioner that's going to tell them, you need to regulate your nervous system, but your practitioner is not set up in a way to help you do that. It's just, again, right, awareness. A lot of my clients have come in and they either have like, in the extreme sense, like hypervigilance, like they just, they can feel their body, they feel their heart rate, like feels like that they're going to have a heart attack, like, and they're cool as a cucumber. They're like, my mind is so fine. And my whole body, like I wake up with feeling like I have a panic attack and can't understand why. The tummy thing, reflux, tummy issues, just not being able to digest well. One that's a little bit sneakier is like noise sensitivity. So if like you just can't handle a lot of noises, a lot of stimulation, that's a really good sign that your nervous system is a little bit overstimulated and need some regulation. Pain, right? And so I'm a physical therapist. Most people come to me because they don't, their neck hurts. I can give them like the best techniques, the best fascial release and mechanics, and like really get all of the joints to move right. But then if they go back and they're stressed, from a chemical standpoint, they're not getting that deep sense of relief.
That makes sense because, like you said, people, cool as a cucumber, but feeling like there's, something going on in the heart. I feel like with modern life, text messages, app updates, blue light exposure, and I think we're like sort of used to that now. I don't know about you, but I mean, it doesn't really fade. In the beginning, like iPhone 1, or as things start to progress, you're like, okay, wow, that's a lot. But I think most people are constantly just getting these sort of interruptions. Like, could these affect our nervous system in any way, just having these constant interruptions?
Absolutely. And again, this just goes back to this like inappropriate output, where now instead of really having our stress center work for a survival mechanism, it's kind of silly. Like we're getting notifications and having a huge brain response. Like it's basically just like taking an injection of cortisol and being like, okay, now function. And we're doing that all the time, just getting hit. So I think just having this awareness, and I think people are craving it and understanding that they want to feel different. So I'm definitely not a purist. I'm not like, oh, we should be on our phones and we shouldn't do this. But I think just having this and understanding some really good practices is going to help your body math, right? And then it's going to, when you're not in a stress state, so like when you are in a yellow and red zone, we talked about just some of like the outputs and symptoms that might be a little bit sneakier. Like if you're scrolling, like if you're in a green zone, you're not going to do as much mindless scrolling. You're not going to do as much online shopping. These are very predictable things that happen when you're in a state of stress because it's numbing, it's coping, right? And so we just kind of get into this rhythm and we form these habits. So if we really want to break any habits, we have to get back down to just assessing the state of our nervous system and understanding where these behaviors are being driven from. And that is from just this like stress state because we feel it. So yeah, absolutely. Just all of these things. And, I think I hear more and more just people that maybe weren't even really aware of this stuff are like, yeah, I'm getting out and having breakfast first thing in the morning, or I'm getting my first light and I even have a red light and I'm using it at night. So I definitely think that the awareness is there and it's so exciting to see.
Yeah, no, it is. As people, sort of get more in tune, like you said, with their bodies, they're going to be able to not have to rely on those devices probably as much and figure, like you said, just go out in the sun instead of laying on this mat, right? And sort of try some natural approaches. I think it was your Instagram, like you've worked with thousands of patients, right? Like I would imagine over time, there's, myths that we all sort of believe. Chronic pain, right? Especially people coming to you, like you said, my neck hurts. Are there like misconceptions out there that how it relates maybe to the nervous system that we don't really know, that people are coming to you and they're like, oh, I think it's this, but it's, and you're like, no, it's actually that.
There's a lot. And so I think one of my passions is spine. I feel like spine is really not treated correctly. It's really hard to get a good spine treatment and to also not have these misconceptions imprinted into our alert system. So number one, backtracking. What the nervous system wants more than anything is to understand that it's safe. Okay. So we have our deep survival centers, and some of these misconceptions can be imprinted in there, and we can accidentally get worse just by these misconceptions that we've been handed, like, for example, a disc bulge diagnosis. So, people will carry it like, postcard on their forehead, like, I have a disc bulge, I have a disc bulge. And we could accidentally make ourselves worse by just not really understanding the nature of what a disc bulge is. So one misconception is if you have a disc bulge, this is kind of like a life sentence. Your back is never going to feel the same. You're never going to move the same. And that's just not the truth. In a randomized control study, they showed that people have disc bulges and have no pain at all. So it's kind of this like dinosaur way of thinking about the spine. And when we can address that underlying brain component, so if you've had pain for more than 3 to 6 months, there's almost always some kind of brain work. Some people are more susceptible to being vulnerable to pain than others, and it comes down to those safety centers. So we actually do training with the brain in order to make the body feel better in those cases. So I've seen all kinds of spine patients. And I would say that a big misconception is that you're going to be in pain forever. And I can tell you that I've had people with MRIs that look very, quote unquote, like scary, that have no pain. Whereas there's some patients that, will have like MRIs that don't look and that still continue to have pain. So that's just a misconception as far as your imaging is not what your function is, for sure.
No, that's great. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and you won't be in pain forever. And just like understanding how we can kind of put a big dimmer switch on the on button in pain, and using the nervous system understanding that if we are in a more parasympathetic tone, we just don't have as much inflammation. Our lymphatic system is tied in with our nervous system. So if we can if we can improve this elimination waste problem, you're going to feel better, right? And so we talked about how a cell can't be in thrive and survive. When it isn't survive, imagine it just kind of being in this like inflammatory soup. And we talked about how nerves are like, you can't really picture them, but they are like these hungry vampires that just need blood flow. So if we have a ton of inflammation around them, they're going to hurt. So if we can improve this elimination of waste problem, calm your nervous system down, I can guarantee you that's going to take your pain down a ton.
Okay, that's great then, because it makes me wonder, like, is that a regulated nervous system? Like I often hear, health professionals will, regulating the nervous system. Is that essentially what it is when it comes to inflammation and basically what you were just describing? Regulating the nervous system. Like, what exactly does that mean?
I think that it would be to improve the balance of appropriate responses in the nervous system. I think that as it becomes more popular, there's going to be a lot of misnomers about regulating the nervous system as if it's something that can be tamed. There is no really tricking the nervous system, but there is just creating safety in the nervous system, because that's ultimately what our brain wants. And then from the body component, we have to get it out of our body physically. So for example, right, physical therapists, people come into me with body pain. If we are hunched over our devices all day, right? I'm going to assume that most people are not breathing properly, right? So we have our forward neck posture. Our diaphragm sits right underneath here under our rib cage. And every time we're in this forward posture, we're closing down on the diaphragm, right? And we talked about this being a huge linchpin for our vagus nerve and our parasympathetic nervous system. So we might accidentally, just from a body standpoint, be staying in this chronic stress situation. So when we talk about regulating the nervous system, sure, like, let's improve that. And we have to improve it comprehensively. So we're not going to trick it. We're not going to do a hack. We're not going to do anything, but we really are just going to understand that if we can improve our posture, improve the 20,000 times a day that we're breathing through our diaphragm, making sure that we're getting full expansion, getting lower and deeper breaths, that we're going to be better off because of it. We're going to be eliminating that cellular waste. We're going to be accessing that parasympathetic branch of the nervous system. And so that's kind of how I would love people to think about their nervous system, versus just like this thing where I'm like, I'm going to hack it and I'm going to stick my face in cold water and vagus nerve is going to activate and I'm going to go on with my day.
I just read an article about that. That's so funny you said that. But like, for your approach, right, your practice, how does it differ from, sort of differentiate itself from maybe, someone else out there?
There's a lot of skilled practitioners, a lot of therapists that are working and using this understanding of the nervous system to treat their patients, kind of from this top-bottom approach. So they're hoping that they can create safety and rewire some of the deep centers in our brain that are responsible for that survival mechanism. And again, I think that all of it is good. Anything that you're doing to help your clients? I would say that my approach is that sometimes all of that can be a little bit overwhelming and frustrating if we don't get the body to also participate in that, right? And so sometimes we can do all the wiring, but then again, we're in this state and our body and our fascia is still holding tight. So the way that my approach is I approach this with improving our lymphatic system. And so again, I'm under the assumption that most people's lymphatic system is backed up because it slows down when you're in a stress state. So I teach them how to self-manipulate and massage the deepest part of our lymphatic system in order just to help that body math process. And then secondly, we do fascial release around the diaphragm. So around the diaphragm, anyone can rub on your tummy, rub on the lower ribs, and I get full expansion of the diaphragm. I used to teach at a university where I would teach these almost about to graduate doctors of physical therapy about the diaphragm. And like even, 14 years ago, they're like, why do I need to learn about that muscle? We know about all of the other muscles, right? And so this is the top of your core. This is the main highway to your parasympathetic center. And I can assume that even in that situation where I had healthy, active, about to be physical therapists, no one was breathing correctly. So over time, our posture has made it difficult because of certain muscle imbalances to breathe correctly. So when we start breathing out of our diaphragm and getting full mobility there, all of a sudden that chronic neck tension starts to melt. All of a sudden those deep hip flexors don't have to work as hard. So we really use this kind of body approach. So I help my clients kind of rebuild their posture in a way that's going to support a more regulated nervous system further on. So yeah, it's a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it sounds that's very cool. Because you do hear about a lot of whether it's people graduating college and they didn't really touch on maybe MDs with nutrition or whatever it might be. So to be able to bring that approach and we might as well discuss like the breath work now because my mind keeps going back to that and the diaphragm breathing, just the overall importance of breath work. Like, how are most of us breathing wrong? And you've touched on why it matters, but more in depthly, like how should we be breathing?
Yeah. So I would say that most people are over breathing. So 20,000 times a day is what we're supposed to be doing. I would assume that number is much higher and we're taking shorter, not as satisfying breaths. Okay. So if you can imagine, we're talking about that low dosage of chronic stress, and you can even kind of do it right now, just like that stresses me out, just kind of breathing like that. And we're probably doing that subconsciously all the time. So most people are not breathing as deep as they should be. We're also bracing a lot. Like I find myself when I'm driving, I'm like, okay, I'm not like Formula racer. Like I don't have to grip every muscle in my body while I'm making a left turn. So that kind of gripping sensation. So this is really fun. We talked about like awareness. Now people can just like notice like, oh, like, am I gripping? I'm always in the car. So all of my awareness those are my silent moments where I'm analyzing. So with our breathing, most people are gripping too tight. Most people are over breathing and not able to get full diaphragmatic breath. I'm just going to throw it in there. Another reason why the diaphragm doesn't work, we talked about that deep center in the brain, that survival center, the amygdala. When you are stressed, it affects your tissues. So the diaphragm, you can imagine, is like this 2 dome-shaped muscle. It literally gets sucked up and retracted like a little octopus. So when you're stressed, it actually tightens the fascia around there. So just understanding kind of that premise as to why we're susceptible to not breathing the right way. And then what I would urge people to do is trying to take slower breaths, and on that inhale, trying to hold it for a second longer than feels natural. So on our inhale, that diaphragm, that dome-shaped muscle, is supposed to drop. Our intestines are supposed to relax, and our pelvic floor is supposed to kind of open like a hammock or a flower. So our diaphragm and our pelvic floor work together. And what's usually happening is that, first of all, the diaphragm's like nowhere to be found on our breath, and we're breathing through our chest, our upper ribs, and if anything, we're actually squeezing our tummy tight instead of letting it fully relax. Especially women, we always want our tummies to look flat and sucked in, and we're not exactly like excited about just letting our intestines relax on our inhales. So finding, just some awareness around that. And then on our exhale, the opposite is true. So if on our inhale, our diaphragm dropped, our pelvic floor relaxed, on our exhale, the diaphragm goes back to normal position, and then the pelvic floor approximates. So in this case, I would say number one, on the inhale, are you accidentally squeezing your booty and your stomach? Okay. If you are, try not to. And then the second step would be to even put your hand. I use a ball with my clients or like a pillow. I have a ton of examples on my Instagram where you put it on that lower rib cage for feet. And on that inhale, you just try to see if you can get your ribs to expand outwardly or in front, right? So our diaphragm can contract, 360 degrees around our lower rib cage, and you're just trying to get lower and deeper on your breaths. So we can try it right now if you want.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't get into this, but another problem is that we tend to mouth breathe. And so
Yes.
attempting, I know that this gets very controversial because everyone's like, well,
Are
I
you into
can't,
the mouth tape? Yeah, I was going to say I want to get into
yeah,
sleep
I
too.
can't breathe out of my nose. I
Okay.
can't, and
Yeah.
I get really, people get mad on Instagram, like, don't worry, we'll fix it. So you want to attempt to breathe through your nose. This gives the diaphragm more resistance to drop on the inhale. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to inhale for 4 seconds. We're going to try to hold that inhale for another 4 seconds. When you are holding that inhale, you're thinking like, am I relaxing my bottom? Is my tummy relaxed? Just kind of this like second level of thinking. And then you're just going to exhale however you want to. So let's go ahead and try it. You can even place your hands on your lower ribs if you want. And our tongue is gently resting on the roof of our mouth. And we're going to try to get our head over our shoulders and inhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Taking that second moment of awareness to see what your tummy's doing, what your bottom's doing. And then slowly release. Exhale. Okay, so as much as most people know this, like box breathing, you also just want to notice, like, is my chest, I've seen clients that every single one of my patients gets assessed for breathing. They'll have the front of their throat literally looks like they're choking when they take in a breath just because they've gotten so used to breathing through their neck. And we do have a vagus nerve pathway through there. So we want to alleviate that and just go lower. So I would just say, like, just try to breathe deeper. And just hold it even for like a second longer than feels natural. And you're going to kind of break that cycle of the overbreathing.
I could feel it in my bottom, I guess, right? Like that's where I felt like I was like very, holding tension or whatever it might be when we tried that. So it was interesting to kind of like, if you could hold it just a little bit longer and you kind of feel like you want to get it out.
That, I talk a lot about like movement snacks, people with desk jobs, just like, just taking a moment and just breaking up like every 30 minutes, just taking a long, satisfying breath, taking a little bit of inventory. And every single time that you access your deep diaphragmatic breath, it literally acts like a plunger for all of that extracellular inflammation, which is just like so cool, right? Because we have it right there. We don't have to take anything. We don't have to buy anything, and just right there for you.
Going back to sleep though, I mean, do you see these videos with like, okay, putting on mouth tape at night and sleeping? How do you feel like the best way to sort of regulate our sleep, if that's even possible to, sort of support the nervous system?
Yeah, so mouth taping is great. Don't do it on your kids because your children don't have the same reflex developed. If you are going to try it like with your kids, like do it during the daytime for like an hour, okay? But for adults, yeah, you can mouth tape, and it just really is just that second level of feedback and awareness of like, okay, like I better start breathing through my nose. And that's great because again, you're just going to become a better breather, a better stress digester, and hopefully stay more regulated. When it comes to sleeping at night, what we do during the day matters. And being able to get through a full stress cycle is important. And so what I mean by a full stress cycle, it's that, slamming on the brake example, like, did we fully digest and then have that lovely parasympathetic rebound? Or have we been at a yellow all day, go, 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 low levels hit of cortisol all day long, and then we're exhausted. So maybe you're lucky enough to pass out, but then you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, bam, that cortisol inappropriately spikes. So having, it's like not very exciting. It's not like, do this at 8 p.m. and you're going to be great all night. It's like, it's really just that low hanging fruit, trying to access your breath throughout the day, trying to have a little bit more awareness of the state of your nervous system. And again, just like even going back to something like changing your breath throughout the day and looking at where your posture is during the day. can have like huge currency and positive effects on your body math later.
And you did mention kids, right? Obviously, don't mouth tape your kids. Are there other like things that parents might be able to do to support their child's nervous system health that they could start today, or does it depend on the age?
The number one thing that we can do is trying to mirror a regulated nervous system, because it all comes down to safety, right? And so this is even subconscious safety. So if my child continuously sees me, and again, like we'll talk about guilt and shame because that's a whole other stress compounder. But if my child sees the way that I react in my day-to-day life, they're going to mirror that. That's going to raise the flags, maybe even just some yellow flags in their deep amygdala. And they're going to mirror my emotional regulation, my physical regulation. So that's the number one thing that we can do. And of course, like my number one motivation to constantly just stay regulated and strive towards being my most green, version when possible for them, right? And number two, when you do see, because they aren't as developed and because they are affected by everything else, screens, get your kid off YouTube and then they have like a meltdown, you can practice this breathing if they have worthy inquiry. Like if they don't, it's funny, like sometimes my sassy child, I won't name which one, will be like, don't tell me to breathe, mom. Okay, let's just do this. So I'll like kind of trick her and we'll do something else instead. Or in a not heated moment, we can be like, you know what? Like we've noticed that this has been having a hard time. Let's see if we can, do this stretch together. Or we have this thing that I can show you that we do in the car and they like it because it feels like it's something that they can do. So I have them just kind of like doing something with their hands. I have them doing some butterfly taps and they seem to like that better than mom cueing them on breathing because it's like a mom thing. So no one wants to do what mom does. And find them eventually like, telling their friends to get on the ball and breathe and do that sort of thing. So I think number one, mirror a healthy, safe regulation system. And number two, just kind of being able to support them. This one just resonates a lot with me. So hopefully it'll help someone else too. When we talk about dysregulation, that's contagious. So like if your energy right now, Joe, is like asking me questions and like maybe like a little like super dysregulated, like you're so calm and, it's making me calm, that's contagious. But if you are dysregulated, that's a little bit contagious too. And it really is like it's a real thing. So dysregulation is contagious and oppositely, regulation is contagious. So most children aren't like natural regulators. And so just even having that awareness, because that one honestly would throw me off a lot. Oh my gosh, like the tantrums and the everything, right? And like I would find myself just getting dysregulated. That's a really good time to use that awareness, kind of press the pause button. Take a moment, try to practice stepping away, maybe taking a deep breath, understanding the situation, like, oh, this is dysregulating me, and then being able to come back with a fresh lens with our kiddos. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Whether it's kids, whether it's adults, storing trauma, like storing it in the body, we hear that people do that, they hold on to it. Does that affect the nervous system and the health of the nervous system?
It does. For me, the way that my approach is with trauma or with anything else, it really just comes down to safety and subconscious perceived levels of safety. So someone that has either had direct trauma or, and this one is just like so tricky, but it's important to have awareness, or has inherited intergenerational trauma, when we talk about epigenetics. They're like, I don't get it. Like, I have a good life. I have a good marriage. Like, why do I still like act or feel traumatized? And so it's actually really cool and empowering that we're now like breaking intergenerational trauma. And even if someone has gone through extreme trauma and they say like it's stored in our muscles or our tissues, most people talk about it being stored in our deep hip flexors. First of all, I just like my patients to feel better. So whatever visual works for them is great. But I like to make it really mechanical because I think the more that you just understand, the less like, I don't know, mysterious it sounds. Like it's in and now it's out. Like I don't really get that. But if we can understand that when our deep amygdala, like our deep survival center doesn't feel safe, it's going to, like I said before, like retract that diaphragm and make it hold tight. Now, what I didn't bore you to death with is that our hip flexors are really, they have a close relationship with our diaphragm. And so that's why you'll hear people, and like you could even feel like if you're stressed out, it's kind of like that gut feeling, like our tummy feels tight, our hip flexors, which is our right on front of our tummy right here, They're like these two long ponytails and they'll just squeeze and feel tight. And so some people might have a physical experience and they'll say that they release their trauma through their hip flexors and that they feel better. And what they're doing is they're using the same technique of alleviating their brain centers by taking away some of this tension. So I think that if we can understand, what we're doing underlying wise and being like, okay, like perceived level of safety, I am safe, I'm working, it's amazing. Like you start rolling through that fascia, you start releasing that diaphragm and that deep hip flexor, and all of a sudden, like your brain feels better, which is super empowering. And it's really, really cool to see my clients that have gone through so much, just improve the state of their well-being because of it.
How about like tech where we sort of discussed technology in general, but like I've even seen like devices saying like they help regulate the vagus nerve. Do they work, or are there any other like technologies that you like or you're excited about, emerging trends coming up?
Yeah. So I think that there's no better practice than understanding and becoming a really good navigator of your nervous system, because at the end of the day, like everybody is so unique and their experiences are so unique. So that would be number one for me. There is vagus nerve stimulators. They've done it on military, like retired military with PTSD. And so they've actually like put in like surgically vagus nerve stimulators, and they've seen significant levels of their PTSD improved. Now, at the end of these studies, not everyone is going to go and get a surgical device. They say, or you can just breathe deeply. And so that's really cool, right? So we now understand that we're trying to get blood flow to a nerve. Now on Instagram, you're going to see most people strumming behind their ears, or like that area that I showed you right there, because that's like a superficial way to access the vagus nerve. And that's great. And not to mention, because I don't know who cares, but there's also like major lymph points here. So you're also just getting some good lymphatic flow. But that vagus nerve is one of the longest, it is the longest cranial nerve in the body. It exits the brain, but it comes all the way down, wraps around the heart, wraps around the tummy, all the way down to our sacrum, okay? Kind of near our tailbone. So it's a big nerve to get blood flow to. So again, going back to our forward posture, if we're sitting like this most of the day, not as much blood flow. So the movement snacks, the being able to move, the being able to breathe deeply, the being able to not restrict, like every single time we take a deep breath, literally restricting and squeezing that vagus nerve is going to also help improve blood flow. So I am not up to date with all of the devices out there. I've personally started using red light. I think anything that you can do that is not invasive, like red light therapy, is something that's been used for so long. And so I've seen red lights that even kind of go around the neck there. So I think they're trying to help the lymphatic system there and vagus nerve. So yeah, I'm sure that there's all kinds of cool inventions coming out.
Yeah. Oh no, that's very fascinating about the PTSD. Good to know that it actually works for people who have gone through that. How about like someone who's like, this sounds awesome, I've never thought about this before. Is there like one simple practice someone could do to start today to help manage stress and anxiety?
My bias is that the one simple thing that they can do, number one, you have to understand that no matter what, your nervous system has the capacity to heal. Because if you don't understand that, then no amount of tissue work or safety will help, right? So we're trying to create safety. And number two, just breathing better, finding our posture, making sure that our head isn't hanging forward above our shoulders the whole day, finding a better neutral spine. I have a ton of resources for that. And just breathing lower and deeper. And just even that should change quite a bit.
So if someone is listening now and they want to sort of connect with you, learn more about you, your services, are you primarily like in person in California, but do you do virtual as well?
Yeah, so I have an in-person practice, but on my Instagram, you'll find being able to connect with me from anywhere in the world. I have a course that takes you step by step on how to use my approach, and I support you every single week for 3 months and how to regulate your nervous system. So just that little bit of awareness that I talked about and like creating safety for each unique experience. We do all of the neuroscience, all of the emotional regulation in that first phase, and all the lymphatic work. And then I teach you how to become a really good breather. And this is so much fun. Like you basically just become your own physical therapist. And towards the end of it, I teach you how to have a really good functioning core with that deep component that I talked about with your pelvic floor, with your diaphragm. And so, there's people that have come in here with back pain, with long haul, with mold exposure, all kinds of patients from all over the world. It's so cool. And yeah, that's the best way to connect with me. So I'll be hosting my spring brain body breath course the first week of March. So absolutely reach out and you can apply for it.
Great. And the website?
The website is activatedpt.com.
I'll put that in the show notes. And then you're most active on Instagram, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make sure that those are in the, and for people that want to sign up for the course and just follow you. You have some great content on there. That's how I found you. Thank you so much for taking the time. I mean, you've given so much like amazing feedback and just teachings about things that I had no idea about and didn't understand how these things were all interconnected. So for me, selfishly, thank you for sharing so much and providing all that information. Activatedpt.com.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I mean, this was so much fun, and thanks for asking such good questions.